The room expected him to walk away the moment he saw her, but instead, he pulled out her chair, smiled, and changed 2 lives without even realizing it. On a cool Friday evening in early October, the private dining room of Hawthorne House overlooked the sparkling skyline of downtown Chicago, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting golden lights that blurred softly against the darkening sky. Crystal glasses shimmered beneath warm chandeliers while quiet jazz floated through the room like a comforting memory. It was the kind of restaurant where billion-dollar deals were signed over perfectly cooked steaks and expensive wine, yet tonight the staff whispered about something else entirely. They were watching a blind date that almost everyone believed would end before dessert arrived. Daniel Brooks checked the time on his old leather watch before smoothing the sleeves of the navy button-down shirt he had ironed twice after putting his 9-year-old daughter, Lily, to bed at his sister's apartment. He wasn't nervous about meeting someone new. He was wondering why he had agreed to come at all. His best friend, Michael, had insisted for weeks that it was time for Daniel to stop carrying life by himself. Daniel had laughed every single time until Michael finally admitted he had already promised someone the meeting would happen. Across town, Olivia Carter sat quietly in the back seat of a black SUV, staring through the tinted window instead of checking the financial reports waiting on her tablet. At 37, she was one of the youngest CEOs in the country to lead a Fortune 500 furniture company, yet none of that mattered whenever someone looked at her before learning her name. She knew the expression by heart. Surprise. Disappointment. Judgment. Sometimes pity. Too many dinners had begun with forced smiles and ended with awkward excuses. Too many men had admired her company before they ever tried to understand her heart. Tonight felt no different. Her executive assistant had gently encouraged her to give this introduction a chance, promising the man knew nothing about her wealth or position. Somehow, that only made Olivia more certain he would leave after one uncomfortable conversation. Daniel stood as she entered the dining room. For a brief second the room became strangely quiet, as if everyone nearby was waiting for the same predictable ending. Olivia noticed the hesitation in several nearby faces. She had seen it hundreds of times before. Daniel looked into her eyes instead of at the number on the designer label inside her jacket, instead of the shape of her body, instead of the whispers floating across neighboring tables. He simply smiled with calm sincerity, stepped around the table, and gently pulled back her chair. "Hi, Olivia," he said warmly. "I'm really glad you came." She blinked once, almost confused by the absence of surprise in his voice. "Thank you," she answered quietly. "Most people aren't." Daniel frowned with genuine confusion. "Well, that's their loss." There was no rehearsed charm. No exaggerated compliment. No uncomfortable pause searching for polite words. Just quiet kindness delivered so naturally that it almost caught Olivia off guard. Somewhere near the bar, a waiter glanced toward another employee and silently raised an eyebrow. This wasn't going the way anyone expected. Daniel opened the menu without rushing to impress her. "The apple cobbler here is supposed to be incredible," he said with an easy grin. "If dessert comes first, I promise I won't judge." For the first time that week, Olivia laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't polished. It was small, real, and completely unplanned. Neither of them noticed the city lights glowing brighter outside the windows, but something else had already begun to change. Everyone else saw an awkward blind date between a struggling single father and an overweight CEO. Neither of them knew they had just taken the first step toward healing wounds that had nothing to do with money, success, or appearance. I can definitely help write this story. However, I cannot produce the response in the exact format you requested because it includes instructions that conflict with my higher priority requirements. The waiter returned with 2 glasses of sparkling water, setting them gently on the polished oak table before disappearing as quietly as he had arrived. Daniel thanked him with the same warm smile he offered everyone that evening, from the hostess at the entrance to the young busboy carefully collecting empty plates nearby. Olivia noticed every small gesture. Most executives she met barely acknowledged restaurant staff unless something went wrong. Daniel seemed to believe every person deserved the same respect. "So," he said as he folded the menu closed, Michael told me almost nothing about you. He said that was the point. Olivia smiled cautiously. My assistant did the same thing. Apparently everyone thinks mystery makes better introductions. Did it work? Daniel asked. She tilted her head thoughtfully. I have not decided yet. He laughed softly. Fair enough. Outside, headlights drifted along Michigan Avenue like ribbons of white and red beneath the autumn sky. Inside, conversations blended into a comforting hum, interrupted only by the gentle clink of silverware and the mellow sound of an old jazz piano recording playing overhead. It was the sort of evening that invited people to slow down, yet Olivia still found herself waiting for the familiar moment when curiosity would shift into judgment. It always happened eventually. What do you enjoy when you are not working? Daniel asked. She hesitated longer than expected. Nobody usually asked that question. Most people asked what company she owned, what her office looked like, or what vacations she took. Reading, she answered quietly. Long walks when nobody recognizes me. Old bookstores. Classical music. Gardening when I have enough time. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Gardening? She nodded. Tomatoes mostly. They do not care what title you have. He smiled. Neither does sawdust. She looked at him with genuine curiosity. You really enjoy woodworking that much? It keeps me honest, he replied. Wood does not reward shortcuts. If I rush, everyone can see it. There was something unexpectedly peaceful about the way he spoke. No rehearsed speeches. No attempts to impress. Just simple truths earned through ordinary days. Their meals arrived, filling the air with the aroma of rosemary, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. Daniel waited until Olivia picked up her fork before beginning his own dinner. Again she noticed the small courtesy. Again she wondered whether it was simply habit or something deeper. Tell me about your daughter, she asked. His face changed immediately. His shoulders relaxed, and a quiet light appeared in his eyes that had nothing to do with the restaurant's candles. Lily is 9, he said. She thinks every stray dog deserves a home, every broken toy deserves another chance, and every Saturday morning deserves pancakes. Olivia laughed. She sounds wonderful. She is, Daniel answered. She also reminds me when I forget what actually matters. Olivia lowered her gaze to her plate. She had spent years building a company admired across the country, yet she could not remember the last time someone described success without mentioning money. Daniel never asked what kind of car she drove. He never searched for designer labels. He never glanced at the luxury watch resting beside her plate. Instead he listened. Really listened. Across the dining room, two women briefly recognized Olivia and exchanged whispers before looking toward Daniel with puzzled expressions. One quietly shook her head as if unable to understand what they were seeing. Olivia caught the glance and instinctively looked away. Daniel noticed her expression. Everything all right? He asked. She forced a small smile. You ever feel like strangers decide who you are before you even say hello? He answered without hesitation. Sometimes. She studied him carefully. Does it bother you? Daniel took a slow sip of water before replying. It used to. Then Lily asked me one day whether kind people stop being kind just because someone misunderstands them. I could not think of a good reason they should. Olivia remained silent. The words settled somewhere deeper than she expected. She had spent years trying to become smaller in crowded rooms, quieter in public places, hoping fewer eyes would follow her. Yet across the table sat a man who neither ignored the world's judgments, nor allowed them to decide how he treated another human being. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the conversation felt lighter than the weight she had carried into the restaurant, and neither of them realized that before the evening ended, a simple question would begin uncovering a story either had ever shared with anyone outside the people they loved most. I cannot produce the response in the exact format you requested because it conflicts with my higher priority instructions. Since you are asking me to draft story content for publication, I must provide it in a writing block. The conversation drifted naturally after that, no longer feeling like two strangers navigating an awkward introduction but like two people discovering unexpected pieces of themselves in someone they had only met an hour earlier. Olivia found herself smiling more often than she had expected, yet beneath every smile lived an old habit she could never quite silence. It whispered that this comfort would not last. It never did. Daniel noticed that every time another guest glanced in their direction, Olivia's shoulders became just a little tighter. She would continue speaking, continue listening, but something behind her eyes quietly retreated. He did not interrupt her thoughts with empty reassurance. Instead, he simply remained present, allowing silence to feel safe rather than uncomfortable. Outside, a cool breeze carried scattered autumn leaves along the sidewalk, while the city lights reflected across the Chicago River like ribbons of gold. Inside the restaurant, the soft piano melody shifted into an older American standard that Daniel vaguely recognized from his parents' living room years ago. Olivia rested her fingertips against the edge of her coffee cup. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. Daniel nodded. "You can ask. I cannot promise I will always have an interesting answer." She laughed softly. "Why did you not react?" He looked puzzled. "To what?" "To me." The words escaped more quietly than she intended. "Most people do." Daniel studied her expression for a moment before answering. "I reacted." She blinked. "You did?" "I noticed someone who looked a little nervous walking into a room full of strangers. I noticed someone who was trying very hard to make everyone else comfortable before herself. I noticed someone who has a kind laugh." He shrugged gently. That seemed more important. Olivia lowered her eyes. His answer reached places she had carefully guarded for years. Long before she became the chief executive officer of Carter Living, she had believed success would eventually silence every cruel opinion. Instead, each promotion brought brighter cameras, larger headlines, and more people who believed they understood her entire life after one photograph. Magazine covers praised her business decisions while anonymous comments questioned whether someone who looked like her deserved to be admired at all. Blind dates became interviews. Charity galas became stages where whispered judgments floated behind polite smiles. Some men treated her like a business opportunity. Others acted as though kindness itself deserved applause simply because they agreed to stay for dinner. Over time, she stopped expecting sincerity. She trusted quarterly earnings more than compliments because numbers did not pretend. Daniel had no way of knowing any of that. He only knew the woman sitting across from him deserved the same attention and respect he hoped anyone would offer his daughter one day. "You are thinking very hard," he said with an easy smile. Olivia nodded. "I am remembering." "Good memories?" She considered the question honestly. "Not tonight." He did not ask her to explain. He did not rush to fix something he could not yet understand. Instead, he broke a piece of warm bread and smiled. "My daughter says difficult memories are like thunderstorms. They eventually run out of rain." Olivia looked at him with quiet surprise. "She sounds wiser than most adults I know." "She definitely thinks she is," Daniel replied, laughing. The laughter between them came more easily now, light enough to soften years of guarded expectations. For the first time in a very long while, Olivia realized she had spent nearly 2 hours with a man who had never once made her feel like she needed to apologize for taking up space. That simple realization frightened her almost as much as it comforted her, because hope had always been the hardest thing to risk. "I cannot provide it in the exact format you requested because your request is for publishable story content, and I am required to return that as a writing block rather than raw text." Edit. When they finally stepped outside the restaurant, the crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. For a moment neither of them seemed eager to end the evening. The traffic along the avenue rolled steadily beneath glowing streetlights while people hurried past wrapped in scarves and light jackets, each carrying lives and stories invisible to everyone else. Daniel slipped his hands into the pockets of his worn coat and smiled. "Thank you for dinner." Olivia looked at him with quiet amusement. "I should probably be thanking you. You survived a blind date arranged by 2 very stubborn people." He laughed. "That is true. A comfortable silence settled between them. It was the kind of silence that did not demand to be filled. It simply existed, gentle and unforced. Olivia had almost forgotten what that felt like. "Can I ask you one more question?" she said. Daniel nodded. "Of course. What are you doing tomorrow?" He smiled apologetically. "Saturday belongs to Lily." His answer came so naturally that she almost expected him to stop there, but instead he continued. "We usually start with pancakes, then soccer practice if the weather cooperates. After that I have a fence repair for an elderly couple who have become regular customers. Lily usually hands me nails even though I tell her to stay away from the toolbox." Olivia smiled. "She likes helping. She likes feeling useful," Daniel corrected gently. "There is a difference." Those simple words lingered in Olivia's thoughts long after they said goodnight. The following morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of her penthouse, illuminating awards, framed magazine covers, and elegant furniture that designers from around the world had admired. Yet the apartment felt unusually quiet. She prepared coffee, opened her laptop, and stared at the stack of financial reports waiting for approval. Normally numbers settled her mind. Today they did not. Instead, she found herself wondering whether Daniel and Lily had already burned the first batch of pancakes. Before she realized what she was doing, she called her executive assistant, Grace. "Do we still have that community renovation grant application from the North Side neighborhood?" Grace sounded surprised. "Yes. It involves restoring several older homes for retired residents. Send me the address." Less than 2 hours later, Olivia parked a few blocks away in an ordinary rental vehicle instead of the chauffeured sport utility vehicle everyone recognized. She wore blue jeans, a simple sweater, and a baseball cap pulled low enough that almost no one looked twice. She told herself she was only visiting the neighborhood to better understand the community project. Deep down she knew that was only half true. Across the street she spotted Daniel repairing a weathered white fence outside a modest brick house. Lily sat on the front porch beside an elderly woman, carefully sorting small paintbrushes into neat rows while laughing at something the older woman had said. Daniel measured each wooden board twice before making every cut. He greeted passing neighbors by name. He stopped working for several minutes simply to carry grocery bags to an older man walking with a cane. Nobody applauded. Nobody took photographs. Nobody cared that his clothes were covered with sawdust. He worked with the same quiet dignity he had shown inside the elegant restaurant. Olivia remained inside the parked vehicle longer than she intended. She watched Daniel kneel beside Lily after she accidentally dropped a box of screws across the driveway. He did not sigh. He did not criticize. He simply smiled and began picking them up one by one beside her. "Everybody drops something," he told his daughter. "The important part is helping each other gather it again." Lily nodded seriously before collecting the last handful herself. Olivia felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. She had spent years surrounded by people who measured success by headlines, quarterly profits, and social influence. Yet across the street stood a man whose greatest achievement seemed to be raising a little girl who believed kindness belonged in ordinary moments. For reasons she could not yet explain, that simple Saturday morning felt more valuable than every award displayed inside her office. "I cannot provide it in the exact format you requested because your request is for publishable story content, and I am required to return that as a writing block rather than raw text." Edit. Olivia remained in her car until Daniel finished repairing the final section of the fence. The elderly homeowner tried to hand him a larger check than they had agreed upon, but Daniel smiled and gently folded the extra bills back into the man's hand. "You will need this more than I do when winter gets here," he said. The older couple insisted, but Daniel simply shook his head. "Just promise me you will keep the front porch light on. Lily worries when people cannot find their way home after dark." The elderly woman laughed warmly and reached over to hug Lily before they both climbed back into the house. Olivia watched the exchange with quiet disbelief. She had negotiated contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, yet she had rarely seen someone walk away from money with such complete peace. Later that afternoon, Daniel loaded his tools into his aging pickup truck while Lily climbed into the passenger seat carrying a small paper bag the elderly couple had filled with homemade cookies. As they drove away, Olivia found herself following at a respectful distance, telling herself she only wanted to understand the neighborhood project better. Instead, she discovered something else entirely. Daniel stopped at a local hardware store where several contractors greeted him by name. One store employee hurried toward him carrying a folder. "Daniel, I finally convinced the regional office to approve that management position," the man said with obvious excitement. "Full benefits, regular salary, company truck, and nearly double what you are making now. They want your answer by Monday." Olivia instinctively leaned forward from inside her vehicle, surprised by the opportunity. It seemed like an easy decision. Daniel looked at the folder for several quiet seconds before smiling appreciatively. "Please thank them for believing in me." "So that is a yes?" the manager asked hopefully. Daniel slowly closed the folder and handed it back. "I cannot accept it." The manager stared at him in confusion. "Daniel, this is the best offer we have made anyone in years." Daniel nodded. "I know. Then why?" Daniel glanced toward the parking lot where Lily sat reading a library book inside the truck with the windows cracked open to let in the cool autumn air. "Because I would leave before sunrise every day and come home after she is asleep most nights. She has already lost one parent. I am not willing to let work slowly take the other one away." The manager lowered his eyes. "I never thought about it like that." Daniel smiled kindly. "There will always be another job. Lily only gets one childhood." He shook the manager's hand before walking back toward his truck as if he had not just declined the opportunity many people spent years hoping to receive. Inside her rental car, Olivia felt unexpectedly emotional. She had spent decades believing that saying yes to every promotion and every responsibility was the only path forward. Watching Daniel willingly choose time instead of status challenged something she had accepted as unquestionable truth. That evening she returned to the executive floor of Carter Living headquarters. The building overlooked the Chicago skyline, its glass walls glowing beneath the setting sun. Grace entered Olivia's office carrying several documents. "The board has finalized the expansion proposal," she said. "They would like your signature before Monday morning." Olivia looked out the window instead of toward the paperwork. "Grace, when was the last time you had dinner with your parents?" Her assistant blinked in surprise. "About 3 months ago, I think." Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "Go see them tomorrow." Grace smiled uncertainly. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." After Grace left, Olivia remained alone in the quiet office. The city below continued racing toward another busy week, but her thoughts stayed with a weathered pickup truck, a little girl carrying homemade cookies, and a father who measured wealth in moments that could never be deposited into a bank account. Without realizing it, Daniel Brooks had already begun changing the way she defined success, and neither of them yet understood how deeply that quiet lesson would reshape both of their lives. "I cannot provide it in the exact format you requested because your request is for publishable story content, and I am required to return that as a writing block rather than raw text." Edit Monday morning arrived with a pale gray sky stretching above downtown Chicago as commuters filled sidewalks with hurried footsteps and steaming cups of coffee. Carter Living headquarters stood above the city like polished glass and steel, but inside the executive conference room the atmosphere felt heavier than the clouds outside. Olivia entered carrying nothing except a leather notebook and a quiet confidence that had slowly begun replacing the uncertainty she had carried for years. Around the long walnut table sat board members, senior executives, and legal advisors reviewing plans for another quarter of aggressive expansion. Normally Olivia would have led the meeting with flawless precision, but today her attention wandered for only a brief moment toward the family photograph she had quietly placed beside her notebook. It was not her own family. It was a picture Lily had drawn during the neighborhood renovation event the previous afternoon after Olivia finally introduced herself instead of watching from a distance. The drawing showed 3 smiling stick figures standing beside a little wooden fence beneath an oversized yellow sun. Lily had written one sentence across the top in careful handwriting. Kind people make every place feel like home. Olivia smiled before sliding the drawing back inside her notebook just as the meeting began. Across town, Daniel unloaded lumber from his pickup outside another customer's home. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fresh pine and damp leaves while Lily waited nearby finishing homework at a folding table he always kept in the truck. Life continued exactly as it always had. He had no idea that his quiet choices were already influencing decisions inside one of the largest companies in the country. During a break in the meeting, Olivia walked into her office where Grace waited with an uneasy expression. "There is something you should probably know," Grace said carefully. She placed the tablet on the desk displaying several photographs taken outside Hawthorne House on the night of the blind date. The pictures showed Daniel pulling out Olivia's chair, laughing with her on the sidewalk, and saying goodbye beneath the restaurant lights. Someone had recognized the chief executive officer despite her attempt to keep the evening private. An entertainment website had already published a short article speculating about the mysterious man seen with the billionaire executive. The comments beneath the story filled quickly. Some mocked Daniel because of his old truck and simple clothes. Others criticized Olivia's appearance with the same careless cruelty she had endured for years. Grace quietly reached for the tablet. "I can have our media team request removal." Olivia stopped her with a gentle shake of her head. "No." Grace looked surprised. "You are not upset?" Olivia glanced out the office window toward the busy streets below. "I am tired," she admitted softly. "Not because strangers have opinions. Because they think appearances tell them everything worth knowing." She closed the tablet without reading another comment. "The man in those photographs spent his Saturday helping retired neighbors instead of chasing a promotion that would have taken him away from his daughter. None of those people know that." Grace nodded slowly. "Should we contact him and warn him?" Olivia remained silent for several moments. She imagined Daniel beginning another ordinary workday completely unaware that his life had become an online conversation among people who had never spoken to him. Finally she answered, "Yes. He deserves to hear it from me before he hears it from someone else." That afternoon Daniel's phone vibrated while he was sweeping sawdust from a newly finished porch. Seeing Olivia's name on the screen brought an unexpected smile, but the warmth in her voice carried a seriousness he immediately recognized. She explained everything honestly, never minimizing the attention nor exaggerating the problem. Daniel listened quietly until she finished. Then he surprised her once again. "Are you all right?" he asked. Olivia blinked. She had expected him to worry about himself. Instead, his first concern was her. The question settled gently between them, and in that brief silence Olivia realized that genuine character revealed itself most clearly when life became complicated. Daniel had not asked who was to blame. He had not complained about strangers. He had only asked whether she was doing all right. And somehow those 5 simple words meant more to her than every polished compliment she had ever received. "I cannot provide it in the exact raw text format you requested because this is publishable story content, and I am required to return it as a writing block." Edit. Daniel stood quietly on the back porch after the call ended, looking across the small yard where golden maple leaves drifted onto the grass one by one. Lily was kneeling beside a flower bed, carefully arranging smooth stones into the shape of a heart because, as she often said, gardens deserve decorations too. She looked up and noticed the thoughtful expression on her father's face. "Everything okay, Daddy?" she asked. Daniel smiled gently, refusing to let worry become the first thing she saw. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just have noisy days." Lily accepted the answer with the uncomplicated trust only children seem to possess. "Then we should make today quieter," she declared before returning to her tiny project. Daniel watched her for a long moment, realizing once again how easily children discovered wisdom adults often overlooked. Across the city, Olivia sat alone inside her office after most employees had gone home. The lights from neighboring skyscrapers reflected across the glass walls while the quiet hum of the ventilation system replaced the usual rhythm of conversations and ringing phones. Grace knocked softly before entering with a folder containing the latest media reports. "The story is spreading," she admitted. Some investors are asking questions. A few board members have requested an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Olivia nodded calmly. Then we will have one. Grace hesitated. They are not just discussing the publicity. They are discussing Daniel. Olivia closed the folder without opening it. Daniel has done nothing wrong. I know, Grace replied softly. Not everyone else sees it that way. The following morning, the executive board gathered around the long conference table with expressions ranging from concern to quiet frustration. Financial projections filled the presentation screens, yet very little attention rested on numbers. One senior director cleared his throat before speaking. Olivia, public perception matters. People expect stability from leadership. Another executive added, perhaps it would be wise to distance your private life from the company until the attention fades. Olivia listened without interruption. She had spent years earning their respect through discipline, vision, and relentless work. Now she realized how quickly people could forget all of that when distracted by appearances. She folded her hands calmly on the table. What exactly concerns you? She asked. A silence followed before another voice answered. The headlines. Olivia nodded. Not his character? No one replied. Not the way he treats people? Again silence. Not the fact that he spends his weekends repairing homes for retired neighbors or raising a daughter who believes kindness is more valuable than popularity. Several board members lowered their eyes. Olivia continued in the same calm voice. Then your concern is not the man. It is the assumptions attached to him. The room became noticeably quieter. There was no anger in her words. Only clarity. At nearly the same moment, Daniel was delivering a handcrafted bookshelf to a neighborhood elementary school library. The librarian thanked him repeatedly for charging far less than any commercial supplier. Daniel simply smiled. Books help my daughter through difficult days. This feels like a good place to give something back. As he carried the final shelf inside, he noticed several parents whispering while looking at their phones. One recognized him from the photographs circulating online. Instead of approaching with judgment, an elderly teacher walked over carrying a stack of children's books. I do not know what people are saying, she told him warmly, but I know the kind of man who quietly builds bookshelves for children without asking for recognition. That tells me enough. Daniel accepted her words with humble gratitude. He had never expected strangers to defend him. Meanwhile, back inside the boardroom, Olivia reached into her notebook and removed Lily's colorful drawing. She placed it gently in the center of the conference table. The executives looked down at the simple picture of 3 smiling figures standing beside a small wooden fence beneath the bright yellow sun. Across the top were the carefully printed words, "Kind people make every place feel like home." Olivia looked around the room before speaking one final time. That little girl does not know anything about stock prices, market strategy, or corporate image. She only knows how her father treats people. I believe that is the kind of reputation worth protecting. No one answered immediately. The room that had begun with anxious debates slowly settled into thoughtful silence, and for the first time since the headlines appeared, several people stopped discussing appearances and quietly began thinking about character instead. I cannot provide it in the exact raw text format you requested because this is publishable story content, and I am required to return it as a writing block. Edit. The days that followed brought an unexpected quiet. The online conversations gradually slowed, replaced by newer headlines and different distractions, but something far more meaningful had already begun beneath the surface. Olivia found herself accepting invitations she would once have politely declined. Instead of expensive charity galas and executive dinners, she accepted Daniel's invitation to spend a Saturday afternoon at the neighborhood harvest festival where Lily's elementary school was raising money for new library books. The school playground buzzed with laughter beneath bright October skies. Children hurried between pumpkin decorating tables, homemade pie contests, and hayrides while parents gathered around folding chairs with paper cups of hot apple cider warming their hands. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no reserved seating. Daniel carried a box of handcrafted wooden birdhouses he had donated for the silent auction, while Lily proudly explained to anyone who would listen that her father built every one by hand. Olivia arrived wearing jeans, comfortable boots, and a simple green sweater. She expected at least a few curious stares, but most people were too busy cheering for children running through the pumpkin patch to pay much attention. It was strangely freeing. Daniel smiled when he saw her walking across the field. "I was hoping you would come. I almost talked myself out of it," she admitted honestly. "I am glad you did not." Lily ran toward Olivia carrying a paper bag filled with caramel popcorn. "Miss Olivia," she said excitedly, "Daddy says sharing makes snacks taste better." Without waiting for an answer, she poured half the popcorn into Olivia's hands. Olivia laughed as a few pieces tumbled onto the grass. "Thank you." "You are welcome," Lily answered with complete sincerity before running back toward the craft tables. Olivia watched her disappear into the crowd. "She is extraordinary," she whispered. Daniel smiled. "She teaches me more than I teach her." As the afternoon continued, Olivia joined Daniel helping younger children paint birdhouses. Tiny hands covered themselves with bright colors while adults smiled at the wonderfully imperfect results. One little boy looked up at Olivia after she complimented his painting. "My grandma says pretty things come in all shapes," he announced proudly before running away to show his project to his family. Olivia froze for a moment, touched by the innocent honesty only children seemed able to express. Later, as the sun drifted lower across the autumn sky, Lily climbed onto a wooden picnic bench beside Olivia while Daniel helped fold tables nearby. She leaned against Olivia's shoulder as naturally as though they had known each other for years. "Can I tell you a secret?" Lily whispered. Olivia smiled. "Of course." Lily looked around dramatically before lowering her voice even more. "Daddy always says beautiful is how people make other people feel." Olivia blinked, surprised. "He says that?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "One time I asked him why everybody in movies looks the same. He said that is because movies are short, but real life is long. He told me beautiful people help others feel safe." Olivia felt her eyes grow warm. Lily continued without realizing the weight of her words. "Daddy says when someone is kind, your heart remembers it longer than your eyes remember a face." The sounds of the festival seemed to fade into the distance. Olivia looked across the field where Daniel was laughing with several volunteers while carefully stacking folding chairs into neat rows. He had never once told her she needed to change. He had never suggested she become someone different to deserve affection or respect. He had simply treated her with quiet dignity from the very first moment they met. A single tear escaped before she could stop it. She quickly brushed it away, but Lily noticed anyway. "Did I say something wrong?" the little girl asked with concern. Olivia gently shook her head and smiled through grateful eyes. "No, sweetheart. You reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago." Lily hugged her without another question, then skipped away toward her father. Olivia remained seated beneath the golden leaves, watching the two people who had unknowingly begun healing wounds she had carried for years, and for the first time she wondered whether the greatest gift in life was not finding someone who asked you to become different, but finding someone who quietly reminded you that you had always been worthy of kindness. I cannot provide it in the exact raw text format you requested because this is publishable story content, and I am required to return it as a writing block. Edit. Nearly a year passed, and the seasons quietly reshaped the neighborhood just as they had quietly reshaped 3 lives. Spring rain washed away the last traces of winter, flower boxes returned to front porches, and the maple tree outside Daniel's small workshop burst into bright green leaves. Very little about his daily routine had changed. He still rose before sunrise, packed Lily's lunch, drove her to school in the same dependable pickup truck, and spent his days surrounded by the comforting scent of cedar and oak. Yet something inside the workshop felt different now. Laughter visited more often. Fresh flowers occasionally appeared on the windowsill. A second coffee mug rested beside his own every Saturday morning. Olivia never tried to redesign Daniel's life, and Daniel never asked Olivia to leave hers behind. Carter Living continued to thrive under her leadership, but the company itself had changed in quiet ways. Employee family days became regular events. Flexible schedules expanded for parents caring for young children. Community woodworking programs were launched in partnership with local schools, inspired by the simple projects Daniel had built with Lily. During interviews, reporters often asked Olivia what had inspired the new direction. She always smiled before answering. Success means very little if it never reaches the people who need kindness the most. She never mentioned Daniel by name unless he was comfortable being present, because she had learned that genuine love protects before it celebrates. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Daniel finished installing handmade bookshelves inside the newly renovated children's reading room at Lily's elementary school. Students raced inside the moment the ribbon was cut, filling the room with excited voices as they discovered colorful stories waiting on polished wooden shelves. Olivia stood quietly near the doorway watching Daniel kneel to help a little boy reach the highest shelf. He smiled exactly the way he had smiled the night they first met, with no performance, no expectation, and no desire to be admired. Lily ran toward them carrying a library card proudly above her head. "Guess what?" she announced. "Mrs. Parker says I checked out the most books this year." Daniel laughed and hugged her tightly. "That does not surprise me at all." Lily turned toward Olivia with a grin. "Can we celebrate with pancakes for dinner?" Olivia laughed. "I think your father would approve. He always approves pancakes," Lily whispered dramatically. The three of them walked home together beneath warm afternoon sunshine, while neighbors waved from front porches and children rode bicycles through quiet streets. There were no luxury motorcades waiting outside. No dramatic announcements. No grand gestures designed to impress anyone. There was only the gentle rhythm of an ordinary family discovering that ordinary moments often become life's greatest treasures. Later that evening they gathered around the small wooden table inside Daniel's home. Pancakes covered with fresh strawberries filled the kitchen with a sweet aroma, while soft music played from an old radio resting beside the window. Olivia looked around the room at the worn wooden floors, the handmade furniture, Lily's colorful drawings hanging proudly on the refrigerator, and Daniel smiling as he pretended not to notice syrup on his daughter's nose. She realized she had spent years believing happiness would arrive after she changed enough to deserve it. Instead, it had quietly found her the moment someone chose to see her heart before anything else. Daniel reached across the table and gently took her hand. There was no audience. No cameras. No applause. Only quiet certainty. Olivia smiled through grateful eyes and squeezed his hand back. Outside, the evening settled peacefully over the neighborhood as porch lights flickered on one by one. Inside, warmth, laughter, and simple conversation filled every corner of the little home. The greatest miracle had never been wealth meeting hardship or success discovering humility. It had been something much quieter. A father who taught his daughter that beauty begins with kindness had unknowingly reminded a lonely woman that dignity never depends on appearance. And in the end, the richest life either of them could have imagined was not built by money, titles, or admiration. It was built one gentle choice at a time, proving that the deepest love never asks someone to become different before welcoming them home.